We are live.
I will now call to order the City of Brantford Special Council meeting. Clerk, can you please confirm the roll's been taken?
Through the chair, roll call's been taken.
Okay, members of council, are there any pecuniary interests to declare on today's agenda? Councillor Samwell?
Anything related to the Brant County Health Unit budget, as I'm employed there.
Noted. Councillor Caputo?
Anything pertaining to the police budget, as I have a son that is currently employed there.
Councillor Scully?
The line item pertaining to the real estate admin's salary, as I am in a relationship with someone in that department.
Councillor Sluss?
Anything related to John Noble Home or POA, as I have relatives working there, family members.
Thank you. And I have one with regards to anything with solid waste, as that my employer is in the same categories. All right, noting that there are no other conflicts. Are there any other items other than 6.1 that council wishes to separate for discussion purposes? Seeing none. All right, we do have a delegate. What's that? Oh, okay, sorry. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to move the motion to approve all items for consideration not separated for discussion purposes? Moved by Councilor Caputo, seconded by Councilor Sam.
Done before, which is actually look you eye to eye and make a presentation. So why are we doing this? I thought perhaps I should first do a quick review of why we're doing the budget this way, i.e. what is the process? And it's because of changes the provincial government made last summer, the Strong Mayors legislation, and it made this budget process mandatory. It's not something you can jump into or jump out of, although many mayors have amended it, as we did, to try and create a budget process that combined the old with the new. And so, just a reminder here, here we go. So here's a summary of the process. So I had to, by February the 1st, present what is called the mayor's budget, which I did. And when I did that, I took the budget staff had prepared in the fall and presented to us in early January. I then took all the suggested changes that came through the estimates committee. So I used the staff budget as it was changed by the estimates committee in January as the starting point for the mayor's budget. And so then what the legislation says is I present that February 1st, which I did, and council has 30 days not to approve the budget. You don't do that now under this legislation, but you can change the budget. And you have 30 days to do that. We're doing it actually at day 19. And I'm hoping we can, at the end of tonight's session, decide we don't need to get any further, that whatever happens tonight are the final set of changes, if any, being made to the mayor's budget. The legislation also allows me to, after today's meeting, veto any changes that are made by council tonight. And then council then has the right to meet for a certain number of days after that to override my veto with a 2/3 vote. I said on February the 1st, and I'll say it again today, that I'm not going to exercise that veto. So whatever council decides tonight in terms of changing the mayor's budget will in essence be final. So no further meetings, no further vetoes. I thought that was probably the most democratic approach and the approach that best mimic or similar to the process we had in the past, which was the final decision on the budget really being made by a majority of council. And that's what I'm most comfortable with. So that's the process. And that's kind of a summary there in a sort of graph format. So what did we do, or what did I do? Before I get into that, I'd like to make a few general comments about the budget process. And this budget, which is the culmination of what staff have done, the input council provided in January, and my review of all of that at the end of January, I think it does reflect a strong commitment to maintain and improve services for Brantford residents at a time when our community is growing, while at the same time respecting the taxpayer, because The taxpayers, many of them are struggling with the impact of inflation, either in their family budgets or their business budgets. The same inflationary pressures, though, are impacting us here at the city. And we were successful over the last 2 years to try and minimize the impact of inflation on our residents. For example, 2 years ago, the property tax increase was 1.98% when the inflation rate was close to 5%. Last year, I thought we did a really great job of keeping the rate down to 2.73%, one of the lowest for a large city in Ontario. And I think quite an achievement when the inflation rate was close to 7% last year. And we did that, as you all know, by a lot of reorganizations that have been done over the last 3 to 4 years under our CAO Brian Hutchings' leadership. The intent of those reorganizations was to improve the efficiency of city operations, but still provide a high level of service to our residents. Unfortunately, the ability to continue to do that has been pretty much exhausted. Over the last 3 years, there have been pretty much every department's been reorganized to some degree and to some extent. And there was really no scope to continue to do that this year in an effort to try and minimize the tax increase. But I think what we've done all together is sort of a team approach is we've been able to deliver through this budget, or we'll be able to deliver some very vital services that residents depend upon. We've increased the resources in some of those departments that are most impacted by the growth in this community. And while at the same time maintaining a level of tax increase that still compares very favorably to any other municipality of similar size. We're still in the lower half of those tax increases we're seeing. And I say this, that for our particular community, we have a lot of growth that's happening, that's impacting our budget. And, you know, whether you want it or not, growth is happening. And so you can either decide that you're going to try and manage that growth, or you let the growth manage you. And I think what we're doing here through this budget, the previous budgets, is we're trying to manage that growth for the benefit of our residents. And that means we do have to spend money, enhancing some of the services, enhancing some of our infrastructure to meet those growing needs. And that's why I've said publicly 2 weeks ago that this is a budget that's not just focused solely on one issue, and the issue being, of course, taxes. It's a budget that's focused on making sure we're providing value to taxpayers, that we're minimizing the tax increase as much as possible, but we're preparing for the future. And some examples of that are our housing program that we continue to invest in. We saw several weeks ago that we've reduced the waiting list significantly. We are putting money away for our share of the cost of a new hospital, which incidentally, there aren't any other municipalities that will benefit from that hospital. They're doing the same thing. We're doing it because we're forward thinking. We're anticipating what the demands will be on our council and our city. And of course, we're also at the same time in this budget, we're making investments in particular in respect to bylaw enforcement that with a focus on making sure our community is safer and more resilient, but also at the same time more vibrant for the residents. So before I get into the specifics, I just want to thank everyone, the staff, for the hundreds of hours they spent in preparing what I call the staff budget. Yourselves, the hours we spent in January with staff going through the staff budget, the recommendations that you made to me, which I considered in preparing the mayor's budget. It was all extremely helpful and much appreciated. So just a quick summary. The budget that was presented to us by city staff had the costs that we control. I call them the controllable part of city budget, was a tax increase of about 4.99%. Then we received what I call the uncontrollable budgets of things like the John Noble Home, the health unit, police services, the library. And when you folded those demands into the city taxpayer budget, it brought it up to 6.48%. At the end of the estimates committee deliberations and those recommendations, the most significant of which was the impact or the decision to reduce the police budget, we got it down to 5.82%. I started from that point, and I'll highlight in a minute some of the changes that I made that brought that down to 5.41%. That's the overall budget impact, tax impact of the budget that I presented to you on February the 1st. So let's get into specifics, because tonight that's what you're being asked to do. Are there any specific changes you want to make to the budget that I proposed? So, and you saw this earlier this month. I start with at the beginning, the first two lines in this spreadsheet. That's the city budget combined with the uncontrollable costs of outside agencies. You'll see the suggestions that were made by the estimates committee. There was removal of the almost $20,000, the Indigenous advisor position. There was reducing the stump grinding services, the cyclical pruning, the splash pad expansion. That was a plus impact. Setting the police budget, that was the single most significant change that the estimates committee recommended. And then of course there was that shift with the adult school crossing guards. And then there was the incremental increase of 35,000 to the physician recruitment committee. So as you can see at the end of all that, in the white, the total budget, that left us with a tax increase of 5.8%, 82%. So what did the changes that I made are as set out on the next page. There we are. So the first thing I did was, and I'll just highlight them, then I'll come back and explain them. So I added back in 100,000 for Indigenous advisory services, not as a full-time position, which would have been 120,000, benefits included, but $100,000 to obtain the advice of outside Indigenous consultants. I reduced winter control by 627,000. That's the largest single change that I made in the budget. And it really reflects the impact that our warmer winters are having on our snow clearing budget. Right now, our snow clearing budget's about $4,600,000. In the last 3 years, the average amount we've spent, and those were winters that were more severe than what we've had this year, about 3.5 million. So why did we have that, like an additional amount? That was to create a reserve to tide us through a winter that was particularly bad. That reserve is now up to $3 million.
Mr. Mayor, we're gonna need somebody to move some time. for
I'm
you.
happy to end it right here if you'd like.
Moved by Councilor Caputo, seconded by Councilor Scully. We'll have to have a 2/3 vote. Discussion point, why would you like to discuss it?
Do you want me to finish my presentation or I can just take questions, whatever you want?
That's good with it. Okay, call the vote.
Yeah.
Motion carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 9-0. Members of council voting in favor, Councillor Sokoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sluss, Martin, McCreary, Hunt, Sample, Van Tilburg.
I'm in favor. My vote doesn't seem to be coming through.
I'll try and zip through pretty quickly. I mean, you've seen this before. You've seen my written explanations. I'm kind of really doing this for the public. So the reality is we've built up a pretty big reserve on snow control. This winter, we're going to be spending probably the least amount that we spent in the last 5 or 6 years on snow removal. That I'm sure that reserve at the end of this year is going to be well north of $4 million. So reducing that budget to $4 million, I think leaves more than enough money for the snow removal budget this winter, and it's still going to give us a huge increase on the reserve. And I suspect next year we'll be looking at this again. I also added in $6,600. So that's to make for free weekday parking in the parking garage for the Bulldog games. The $6,600, that's what staff estimate is the revenue we're going to lose based on the extent to which the parking garage has been used for this particular season of the Bulldog hockey. And I think that just demonstrates that people aren't using it. This is designed to encourage people to use it and maybe take some pressure out the Freshco lot. I also removed the solution hub that was in the community strategies and family supports budget. Didn't think that was particularly necessary for this year. I also, you recall, there was that engineering made a presentation to us to shift some of the expenses from capital to operating. It was about 10% of about 4 or 5 positions. I looked at that. I wasn't convinced and thought we should maintain what we've done in the past and 100% of those particular salaries be allocated to capital. That's a total of $43,000. And then the others, I think I don't need to explain them. They make sense. But last thing I want to talk about is I did propose removing the aquatic arena operator. And that was one of about 12 or 13 positions in what were staff described as strategic investments. I'd like to get that up on the screen here. We have it? I think the clerk will have to add it in. Few seconds. So what you're about to see on this screen, it was in, there we are. So this was in the city staff budget. These are what are described as strategic investments. They're investments in people employed by the city, and they are additional hires or additional employees designed primarily to provide additional resources to engineering where growth is having the most extensive impact, and environmental services. Also to bylaw and security, because there's a growing demand for their services, and that's part of our priority of providing a safer community. So I went through all 13 of these positions. I considered very carefully what staff had said and the estimates committee to justify these investments. I determined there should be one change, and that was the aquatics arena operator, $64,996. It's actually the last item on that table. And I considered very carefully the explanation that staff had given to us at the estimates committee, and I wasn't convinced that it was a necessary expense or investment for this year. I left in the other positions after carefully considering them, primarily because many of them don't have an impact on operating because they come out of capital. The others, the total impact's about $465,000, which is about 1/3 of a percentage point on the tax bill. But I considered them, those positions, and thought these are the type of investments we need in order to deal with growth. And also to make sure our community is safer. And using that as a criteria, dealing with growth, managing growth, making sure our community is safer. And some of the parks and recreation services are also increased to match the increased demand that growth has imposed on parks and rec. I thought these were appropriate investments. So that's a quick summary of the changes that I made to the city budget as we changed it or recommended it be changed, estimates committee, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you for a most collegial presentation. Much appreciated, and your work on this does not go unnoticed, sir. I would like to ask you a question regarding the parkade revenue item of $6,600. The language indicates that we would be foregoing income. Is that based upon historic income for those hours on those days?
Right. It is.
That would work out to something like $200 per day. Given
Something like that.
Some dates.
I haven't done the math, but the question I put to staff was, if we make Bulldog parking for the weekday games, it's already free for games on Saturday and Sunday. What will the impact be? What revenue will we lose by doing that? And that would be primarily Friday games, the occasional Wednesday game, and that was the answer they gave me, $6,600.
So to be clear, then that's revenue that we currently would be receiving from, we'll say, $200 a day of after-hours parking that would now be free.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are some people who currently are parking in the parkade during Bulldog games on Wednesdays and Fridays, but there aren't very many because it costs $225 per hour, and everything else around there is basically free. So understandably, no one's going to use the parking garage for the weekday games.
Thank you.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. The $100,000, what was it called? A placeholder, I guess, for Indigenous Advisory Services. Is that to employ legal Or is that to talk to somebody with knowledge on Indigenous affairs?
Not legal. That's with someone with knowledge on Indigenous affairs, preferably having an Indigenous background themselves or their firm does. And I think we recognize that that's an important priority for us, which is to strengthen and improve the relationships we have with our partners, including the Indigenous in the watershed. And there are times that I've experienced this, that it's certainly helpful to have the advice of those who know those Indigenous nations better than I do or anyone at City Hall. And that advice can be extremely helpful. We had some of that through our Indigenous Affairs employee, but it came, it was fairly expensive. I didn't think it justified a full-time position. Will we spend $100,000 over the next year? I'm not sure, because I had to come up with a dollar amount. And certainly it's less than what a full-time employee would cost us, but $120,000. This would be the maximum amount that we would spend. It may be that we spend less. I'm not sure, because this is the first time we're going to do this. But I do know this, it certainly will be extremely helpful for myself, staff, and council as we move forward to strengthen the relationships we have with the Indigenous nations in this area.
Okay, I think you answered my second question about that item. In the past, then we have not had a budget. So we got advice free, or did we just not get advice?
Well, we had advice for a period of time because we did have an Indigenous Affairs consultant for about a year, a little longer than a year. And we were receiving advice and assistance, but did it justify a full-time hire? I didn't think so.
Okay. And then my second question, if I've got time still, is the winter control. It sounds like that reserve is still pretty fat. Is there an opportunity to maybe find some more bucks in there?
I think there will be probably next year, right? Because we could still get hit by a major snowstorm this year, although the long-range forecast into early March is rain and very temperate. But so right now, the reserve, take into account the surplus from last year, is 3 million. And so I think the idea was to create a reserve somewhere between 3 and 4 million, given we spend on average, at least the last 2-3 winters, 3.5 million. So could we reduce it even further? We could, but I suggest that we hold off doing that until next year. We see where the reserve is at the end of next year. I expect it's going to be probably at least 4 million, probably 4.5 million. I think that would give us the opportunity next year to make a further substantial reduction in this budget.
Okay. If memory serves me, the snow budget goes from a calendar year, does it not? So this year's budget doesn't expire till December 31st. So we're not looking at just springtime, we're looking at fall as well, right up to December 31st, correct?
That's correct. And if we have a very difficult November, December next year, I mean, we may see that the projection that we have right now may not come about.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor McCreary, second time.
Further to that, and thank you, Mr. Chair, you're doing a great job tonight. And I do like that choice of tie. I'm just going to ask the mayor if he feels that his faith in groundhog predictions is not jinxing us and dooming us to another 6 weeks of 6-inch snowfalls to be followed by the same next fall. And is he willing to accept full responsibility for the onset of really lousy weather and unheard of prior quantities of snow?
I feel extremely confident in the decision that I made because the last 2 years where the winters have been a little more difficult than this winter, the average we spent on snow removal was about $3.5 million. And what's in the budget right now is $4,600,000, far more than what we've spent in the last 2 winters. We've got a terrific reserve right now, about $3 million. I'm confident, even though the Groundhog Day prediction could be wrong, that even if we run into, let's say, a more biting end to this winter and maybe a more difficult fall, there'll certainly be enough room in this budget to pay for that, because it'll be at $4 million.
Thank you for that, Mayor.
Councilor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question to you, Mr. Mayor, and maybe to staff as well. So do we have an opportunity to actually take out, say, $1 million out of that? And if for some reason we end up overspending, would we not be able to draw from those reserves and take $1 million into our operating budget this year as an opportunity?
I think staff should best answer that. I mean, so I took out the $627,000 to bring it down to 4 million. Staff didn't like that. They had concerns about that. So Indy, can you answer that question?
To the chairs, Mayor Davis, correct. We're nervous about it in general, and we shared that with Mayor Davis. So any other decrease, we're really looking at, it's a risk. It's a risk, and that's all basically that I can say in terms of how much we want to reduce it. We could reduce it further than $1 million. It's all risk. What we'd like to do with this reserve potentially is even try to buy and look at vehicles in the future, et cetera, so we can expand our fleet with the growing city. So we had some plans with this, but reducing it anymore, I'd feel like we'd be at a risk.
Thank you.
Now I have one. And I think you know what's coming. So with the aquatics arena operator position, it's a shared position between Parks and Rec and the arenas. With Woodman coming online this year and with the staff already stretched, we get a couple of Bulldogs games, for example, in the winter, we're going to be looking at 20 shifts and we only have 16 shifts of coverage. Are you not thinking we're taking a risk here?
No.
Any explanation for that?
Well, we already had built into the historical budget staffing for Woodman. And we had originally anticipated Woodman was going to open last summer, but due to some supply issues with the contractor, we weren't able to do it. So it's already, I believe, built into our budget staffing for Woodman. The question about do we need more staffing to assist with Bulldogs? Well, we did add to the staffing component last spring when we knew we had the agreement with the Bulldogs to, we thought, provide enough resources at the Civic Center to handle the Bulldog season. So I remain unconvinced it's necessary. Maybe the experience this coming year will demonstrate that there is a need for it and we can always build it in next year's budget.
Sounds good. Not seeing any other questions, you can take a seat. We'll be discussing your matter later.
Yeah, and I should just say to the viewer that the Strong Mayors legislation does allow me to actually participate in the debate and actually vote. So I will come up and take my chair.
Okay, we're gonna move on to section 5. Can I get a mover and seconder to receive the estimate committee minutes? Moved by Councillor Coley, seconded by Councillor Martin. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can we call the vote?
The motion to receive the previous estimates committee meetings carries on a recorded vote of 10-0. Members of council voting in favor: Councillor Sokoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCreary, Carpenter, Hunt, Samuel, Avanto, Borg.
Thank you. May I have a mover and seconder to place all items separated on the floor? Moved by Councillor Samuel, seconded by Councillor Sokoli. Any discussion? Councillor McCreary.
Is this the point where you're looking for amendments to what's before us?
Whatever your heart desires.
Is that a yes or a no? Or
Yes.
maybe? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your joviality. So I do have a couple of amendments I'd like to introduce if that's appropriate at this time. The first would be to have the budget for the mayor's Indigenous support to, I believe, $50,000. And I'd be seeking a seconder for that. And I see I have one in Councillor Martin. In as much as it's not a staff position, $50,000 would provide us with about $4,000 a month to spend on consultant fees, which to me seems quite appropriate. Thank you.
Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, call the vote.
The amendment carries on a recorded vote of 6-5. Members of council voting in favor, Councilors Sullivan, Marn, McCreary, Carpenter, and Toborg. Members opposed, Councilors Samuel, Hunt, Caputo, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Would the clerk be able to show me the other amendment that I wrote? That was some time ago. And I'm not as young as Councilor Sokoli. Should be on the screen. Split screen. Thank you. So we have a number of strategic investments, which used to be called unmet needs, but we've coined a way better phrase for it, which I wholeheartedly endorse. So we have a number of additional positions which we intend to add in years 1 through 4 of the budget. And my amendment is that we defer all those hires to the following budget year for those years in question. And seeking a seconder for that. And I see I have one in Councilor Martin. And I don't dispute the mayor's assertion that these are positions that need to be hired at some point in time to deal with the growth that we are facing. I think, though, that given what's before us and given the struggles that many people in the community are feeling, this may not be the time to add additional staff to the municipal complement. I would note that we're already I believe there's 13 new hires that the police department is proposing this year, which were apparently necessary, although I fail to see how they can completely accommodate the hiring of all those people. Who's going to train them? Who's going to supervise them? Here, it's not that question. It's simply a matter of having that discussion tonight about showing the community that we appreciate the hardships out there and making do with a complement for another year for each of the 4 years following. So I would suggest, excuse me, I would suggest that councilors give some thought to this. And, maybe the mood of council might be to have a separate vote on each of those, which might be the appropriate way to deal with this, because some may have things that they feel to be more important than other things. And I would in fact suggest to the clerk that we do the vote on each of these individually so that we can all have our say. Perhaps some savings can be realized.
Councilor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After hearing the last part, that might be the wise way to go about it, because I'm not really in favor of not going ahead with hires. If we are growing and we're growing daily and we're growing by the hour, there are a lot of things that have to get done. And I think sometimes we find ourselves slowing ourselves down only because of a lack of staff. And in order for us to be able to proceed efficiently, rapidly, and to get things done, I think that we need to be able to look at this in a proper fashion. So I don't believe I'll be supporting this unless I actually see it line by line.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, I would caution members of council. First of all, the dollar amount, as I indicated in my presentation, I had taken out one of those positions because I wasn't convinced it was necessary this year. The remaining positions would impact the budget by about 465,000 because many of those positions are paid through fee for services, for example, in water. So that's about 1/3 of 1%. So it's 0.003. But look ahead in the crystal ball. I mean, we've got a multi-year budget. Next year, the forecast is 5.28% because of the outside agencies, the uncontrollable budgets. The city portion next year is estimated to be about 3.8%. But assuming that the outside agencies are on the same track they're on as this year, 5.28%. So how are you going to add that in next year? Like, there's not going to be the capacity next year to add them in, given what the forecast is for the tax rate increase next year. So really, this is the year to do it. Otherwise, you're just going to compound the problem that you're going to have in next year and the year after, which I point out to you are 1 and 2 years closer to an election. That's all I'll say.
Councilor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly sympathetic to the intent. I get it. Folks are struggling out there and they're having a rough go of things. but sometimes you can bite off your nose to spite your face, and I think that might be the case here. We've, I think it's been said, I'll say it again, we're a fast, rapidly growing community. And that growth provides finances to move forward and move the whole city forward. The assessment that's created by a lot of the growth that's happening. A lot of these folks contribute to that growth happening faster if we are hiring them. So it'll put things through the system quicker, get us back into more tax revenue faster, and we're going to grow irregardless. So we may as well grow at a speed that's advantageous to the city as opposed to stifling the city. So as much as I agree with your sentiment, I just don't think it's appropriate here. So I'll be voting against.
Thank you. Counselor Scully.
Yes, thank you. I think deferring this is incredibly short-sighted. I think there's a need, and the staff that we do have here are stretched incredibly thin as it is, and they work really hard. And if we need to increase our complement internally to be able to move things forward, this certainly is the time to do it. And I think we've learned that delaying on things that we need usually doesn't work for us. So I won't be supporting this today. Thanks.
Not seeing any other hands. We'll call the vote on the first item.
So through the chair, the first vote will be for the social media specialist, and the vote will be to defer it to the next budget year. The motion is lost on a recorded vote of 3-8. Members of council voting in favor, Councilors McCreary, Martin, Carpenter. Those opposed, Mayor Davis, Councilor Sullivan, Sless, Hunt, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Caputo, and Sokoli. The next item is the finance coordinator budgets. Councilor Carpenter, we're just waiting for your vote. The motion fails on recorded vote of 2-9. Members voting in favor, Councilors McCreary and Martin. Members opposed, Councilors Sullivan, Sless, Hunt, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Carpenter, Caputo, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. The next item is the financial analyst.
Mr. Chair, can we comment individually?
If you choose to.
Well, yeah, I thought it would be helpful to know what the financial impact is, which on this one, 0, is funded through development fees.
Okay.
The motion's lost and recorded vote of 1-0. Members in favor, Councilor McCreary. Members opposed, Councilor Sokoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, Carpenter, Hunt, Samwell, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis. The next item is the bylaw enforcement assistant. The motion fails and recorded vote of 2-9. Members in favor, Councilors Martin, McCreary. Members opposed, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, Carpenter, Sless, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis. Next is the bylaw co-op student. is lost on a recorded vote of 3-8. Members in favor, Martin, McCreary, Carpenter. Members opposed, Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Dave. Part-time municipal law enforcement / property standards positions to full-time. Motion is lost on a recorded vote of 3-8. Members in favor, Martin, McCreary, Carpenter. Members opposed, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis. The next item is parks weekend / evening staffing requirements. Motion is lost on a recorded vote of 2-9. Members in favor, Martin, McCreary. Members opposed, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Carpenter, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis. Building maintenance technician.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, the next two positions, building maintenance, environmental service technologist, they are funded through water and sewer rates.
Thank you.
Is lost on a recorded vote of 1-0. Members in favor, Councillor Carpenter. Members opposed, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, McCreary, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Environmental services technologist. Is lost on a recorded vote of 2-9. Members voting in favor, Councilors Martin and Carpenter. Members opposed, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, McCreary, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis. Supervisor GIS. Is lost on a recorded vote of 2-9. Members in favor, Councilors McCreary and Carpenter. Members opposed, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, the next two are project managers for structure and stormwater and engineering services. It's 2 full times. Most of it's funded from capital, but I can tell you if there's anything in here that is directly related to managing growth, I mean, they all are. These in particular, and I'm hoping it will be unanimous that we keep these in our budget. No.
Thank you.
Two project managers, structures and stormwater. Is lost and recorded vote of 0-11. Members opposed, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Carpenter, McCreary, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, this last one is customer service temporary high billing representative. That's when we've had that problem with some customers who they receive a very high bill. Maybe there's a leak in their toilet or whatever, and managing that. And it is funded through user rates. There's no impact on the mill rate.
Thank you.
That is lost on a recorded vote of 0-11. Members of council voting In opposition, Councilors Van Tilburg, Samuel, Hunt, Carpenter, McCreary, Marn, Celeste, Caputo, Sullivan, Sakoli, Mayor Davis.
All right, do we have any other discussions about 6.1? Counselor Samuel?
So I also have an amendment that I would like to bring forward. Go ahead. All right, so moved by myself and seconded by Counselor Martin that the following changes be made to the mayor's budget. Number one, that transfer the city services budget allocation in the amount of $775,674 for the adult crossing guard services back to the police budget. And number two, to increase the police budget by an additional $159,441 to a total budget of $49,491,606 to allow for the police board to provide adequate and effective policing for our community. And to that, I just want to say that the Police Services Board has worked really hard on this budget to make the reductions that were necessary, and we hope that all of council can support this tonight.
Counselor Schless?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to, I guess, Joelle. Doing this, what is the decrease from the original ask of the Police Services Board to what we are now potentially approving? What would the difference be? In other words, how much in cutting did they do?
Through the chair to Councillor Celeste. I believe from the original budget that was presented to today, it would be almost $916,000 reduction.
Okay, I believe initially we asked for $1 million and we're getting 916. Is my math correct?
When estimates set a budget for police, that represented a reduction of $1,075,000 the first time. They're now at about $916,000 total reduction.
Thanks, Joelle.
Counselor McCreary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope you would provide a little latitude. When last estimates committee sat, the two police service board representatives who also inhabit this room were requested to inquire of the police service what their expenses were in providing assistance to the Ottawa police in an action which since has proven to be illegal. And I wonder if you might permit one of the two police service board members to give us that answer today, and then allow me to move an amendment which may arise from that answer.
Point of order. That has nothing to do with the resolution on the floor.
Counselor Carpenter, can you speak a little bit more to why you feel it's a point of order?
Point of order because the resolution on the floor doesn't speak to any trip to Ottawa or anything like that. So a conversation asking questions about that has got nothing to do with the resolution on the floor, nothing even close.
Counselor McCreary, can you speak directly to the amendment that's on the floor?
Yes, I can speak to it. The amount is germane to the discussion before us today, and there remains an outstanding inquiry from this august group to have information provided to us by the representatives that sit both here and at Elgin Street. And I'm simply looking for an answer to that question that was posed, the amount of money that was spent on that foray, and whether or not, in fact, it was recovered by the Brantford Police Service. And if not, my intent is to reduce their budget by that amount and let them seek that amount from the Ottawa Police Department, Government of Canada, or Province of Ontario. That's my explanation, Mr. Chair. I don't think it's unreasonable.
Thank you. Are either of the board members prepared to answer that question?
When it's my turn to speak, I'll address that.
Okay. Oh, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to Councilor McCreary's request, the cost was approximately $53,000. We're not sure how much of that will be recovered from Ottawa. It's something that's in the process. We're hopeful to get an answer on that soon. The adult school crossing guard was smoke and mirrors, and luckily we've got that decision reversed. That's back to the police department where I feel it belongs. Because it wasn't actual savings, it was taking money from one pocket and putting it in another. But one of the things that we heard at the last time we were discussing the budget is we need extra clerk staff because the province has downloaded a number of things onto the police department that were previously done by the province. And there's no money forthcoming from the province for that. So it's a case of downloading that is increasing our costs at the police station. I was hoping to get by with fewer clerks, but the board was convinced that 5 was the number that was appropriate. The original ask by staff was 12. The chief put 10 in his budget and we cut that in half. So we worked very hard to find replacement cuts for the adult school crossing guards. So we got back to the original last ask short about 160,000. And I think if council doesn't want to change the mayor's budget, we can accept this and then take another 160,000 out of the snow removal budget to keep things at the same number. But that'd be a further amendment later if this carries. And if there's anything else that people ask, I'll address it in my second speaking opportunity if I get the chance.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, I have a question for staff through you, Mr. Chair. So we did the Indigenous Affairs Advisor staff, our council reduced that by 50. There's this change. What would the cumulative impact be? I think we were at 5.41% at the beginning of the night.
Through you, Chair Sullivan, to Mayor Davis. Yes, we started the night at 541. The first reduction took us to 538. This addition to police would take us to 5.47.
Mr. Chair, commenting about this, I'm very glad to see that Police Services has reversed its decision on the school crossing guard. I think that program is best managed by Police Services. They do an excellent job and probably a much better job than we could at City Hall. Although, given the initial response of the Police Services Board to the decision to adjust their budget by $1,076,000, we at the city were prepared to take it on. So I'm very happy to hear that Police Services Board has moved back from that position and that the guards will be where they should be. And yes, obviously you got to adjust the budget to reflect that. I also believe that this response and what I'm hearing from our two board representatives indicates to me that the Police Services Board, instead of doing a very abrupt, less than sincere response to our request to take $1,076,000 of the budget, has given us now, I believe, a very sincere and genuine response. I'm confident they've taken a hard look at their budget. They've come close to what we asked for, and we have to realize that that amount that we came up with, $1,076,000, it was somewhat arbitrary as well. So I can support this, given that we've gone kind of in a back and forth with the Police Services Board. I think in a fairly legitimate public debate about the cost of policing, and I think it's time we end this ongoing dialogue, so that we have the certainty in our budget and Police Services will have certainty and stability in their budget for the coming year. But I underlined my comments I made a month or so ago that this is going to be an ongoing dialogue, and that is, what can we afford as a community for policing services? And in particular, what increase in the cost of policing services can we afford year to year, given all the other demands that we have? But for tonight and today, I'm content to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. Question to staff though, when the crossing guard was moved over to the city, we also hired a person to, what we put in the budget, hiring a person to do that. Where's that money gone? I believe it was 145,000 or something like that.
Through the chair to Councillor Carpenter, that was included in the estimated amount of what the service would cost. So we did take what was in the police budget for that service and further reduce the police budget by $130,000 for the cost of what the city would need to pay for a supervisor to manage that service. So that money now that police is taking
m-
that service back has all been returned to the
That's
police.
been moved back. Okay, so I would agree that it's best managed in the police services. If it was managed by council, I think that every time someone requested a crossing guard, we would most likely approve it. And we see that budget escalating quite a bit. Because we've had these arguments before about adding crossing guards to every corner, which just isn't possible. They do a terrific job, by the way, at risk. If we just get more people to pay attention to when they tell you to stop, you need to stop. You can't enter a crosswalk until the crosswalk is completely clear, just by the way. All right, thank you.
Not seeing any other hands. Oh, Councilor McCurry to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to introduce my amendment now or once this amendment's dealt with?
Probably best to deal with this one first.
Thank you.
Call the vote.
The amendment carries unanimously and record a vote of 10-0, noting that Councillor Caputo declared a conflict and did not vote. Members of council voting in favor, Councillors Van Tilburg, Samuel Hunt, Carpenter, McCreary, Marne, Sless, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Councilor McCurry, would you like to address your amendment now?
I sure would. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that that the police services budget be reduced by $5,000. I'd be looking for a seconder. While I'm waiting for a seconder, let me just say that my intent is to encourage the Police Services Board to recover that 50 some odd $1,000 from whoever.
Point of order, point of order. You can't speak to a resolution that has been on the floor.
The item's not on the floor.
Darn. Thank you.
And a lack of a seconder. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. So go to motion to shorten the amendment period. That pursuant to the subject 7.4 of the Ontario Regulation 530.22, council hereby shortens the amendment period from the 30 prescribed days to 20 days. So 6.2 is the budget finalization impact, 2024-125. Is there any discussion on this?
I'll move it. If you're looking for someone to put it on the floor.
All right, moved by Councillor Scully, second by Councillor Martin. Mayor Davis would like to speak to it.
Yeah, just by way of explanation. So the legislation gives council 30 days to respond to make changes to the mayor's budget. And this is, what this does is it's cutting it off tomorrow. In essence, the impact of this is to say, tonight is the night to have done that. We're not going to come back later in February and try and amend it further. We're trying to finalize it tonight, and that's what that resolution says.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the vote.
The motion carries on a recorded vote of 10-1. Members of council voting in favor are as follows: Councillor Sokoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Marne, McCreary, Hunt, Samuel, Van Tilburg, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. There are no resolutions. There's no notice of motions. We now move on to bylaw. Oh, sorry, Mayor Davis.
I'm hoping you'd allow me some latitude here. I'm about to sign the mayor alter direction that says I'm not exercising any vetoes in the budget. So once I sign this, it in essence makes it final, subject to any bylaws we have to pass to implement the budget.
Thank you. So can I get a mover for the first and second reading of the bylaws? Councillor Scully, and state your seconder.
Councillor Martin will second that. sorry, the bylaws here. Moved by myself, seconded by Counselor Martin, that leave be given to the mover and seconder to introduce the following bylaws for first and second reading. Bylaw 9-2024, bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford with respect to the special city council meeting held on February 20th, 2024.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call the vote.
First and second reading carries on a recorded vote of 10-1. Members of council voting in favor, Councilors Van Toborg, Samwell, Hunt, McCreary, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. Can I now get a mover and stating a seconder for the third reading of the bylaw? Counselor Martin?
Yeah, I'll move it, seconded by Counselor Secoli. That the third reading be taken and that the bylaws be numbered by the clerk. Signed by the mayor.
All right, call the vote.
The third reading of the bylaw carries on a recorded vote of 10-1. Members in favor, Councilors Van Toborg, Samwell, Hunt, McCreary, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. And that is it. This meeting is adjourned.